DNC, contagious nodular dermatosis, among breeders is like having a bedbug infestation in your home and being told, as soon as there is a case of bedbugs in a house, we burn it down. That's it. I think that if this happened to you, you would disagree with this protocol and try to get around it. The strategy today is like to tell to farmers, if you leave your herd in its natural state, you risk a 10% mortality rate. If you listen to the government, it's 100%.
Aussi, on a tenu à faire venir des non syndiqués parce que tous les présents au nom en France, manifestation propre, c'est bien. On en rajoute, s'il n'a pas la place. Bon, il laisse la place comme ça un céréalier, ça te dérange pas. Travail. Mais je vais laisser.
Today we have structures that represent 100 to 300 animals, and we know that out of that number, there will inevitably be 1 or 2 animals that will react to the vaccine. Today, they are unable to provide us with solutions to distinguish between a reaction to the vaccine and the disease, so they systematically slaughter them. My herd is healthy, and I'm not going to invite trouble by letting the wolf into the sheepfold. If they don't give us some leeway, I, for one, will not vaccinate. It's not possible. Tomorrow you vaccinate. 3 days later, you have an animal that reacts and they slaughter your 300 animals. We have delivered all our animals, day and night. We don't have vacations, there's no Christmas, no New Year's Day. We are always there. We know our animals inside out, so it would be good if the information coming from the grassroots was heard. It's no longer tenable, we can't sleep at night. I settled my daughter in this year and I was proud of her. Today I have a bitter taste in my mouth. I feel like I gave her the rope to hang herself. Do you understand that?
Alors, on lui a... Faut qu'on parle du sang de betterave. On n'est pas éleveur, on est maraîcher, mais on soutient les... Un peu de jus de betterave, eh, c'est bon pour la santé, consommez des légumes français.
There, the last 2 herds that were slaughtered had both been vaccinated. They slaughtered the herd despite the vaccination, because they say the disease appeared before the vaccination, but no one can prove it. They don't give it time. You vaccinate, you leave it for 40 days under observation, and then you see. If there are no new cases, it's fine, it's a success. But here they vaccinate, and then 3 days later they come to see if the disease is there. Well, yes, they've just inoculated it with the vaccine. So what do you want me to say? There's no common sense in these policies. It's no longer understandable. And that's why they're completely losing the base. Farmers no longer listen to Mr. Arnaud Rousseau, head of the majority union FNSEA, and his Secretary General Ms. Annie Genevard, Minister of Agriculture. It's completely crazy. It's completely crazy.
We are very afraid. We are at a point where our margins are very tight. So agriculture is not very profitable at the moment. It is not very profitable very often, and it is even less so at the moment. So we are afraid of unfair price competition. We are afraid of imports into the European Union of products that do not meet our standards and quality at prices that are graded. We are barely surviving, but the price of bread for consumers has not fallen. For 3 years now, the price of products in supermarkets has continued to rise since COVID and since the war in Ukraine, while our selling prices have collapsed. And on top of that, our purchase prices, for example, for plant protection and products, are rising at the same time. We are really suffering from a contraction in our margins, our economic margins, and consumers are seeing a reduction in their purchasing power. So that means that somewhere in this equation, there are middlemen who are lining their pockets. And that's what's disgusting. The agricultural community didn't have any basic trust in Ursula von der Leyen to begin with, and hasn't trusted European institutions for a long time, which is sad. And now, in fact, we feel abandoned by Europe when it calls into question these criteria, what of sustainable development, of support for farmers, to now turn solely to free trade and exports. And we are truly convinced that in Europe, no one will come out a winner, that for the consumer, it will be an increase. It won't change anything. There won't be an increase in tariffs, but prices in the supermarket won't go down. Our selling prices will go up again, and it will be other intermediaries in the middle who will line their pockets.
Certainly, the EU did not make this agreement for the agriculture and food sector. It is a deal which has been negotiated over 25 years. We, ERUPT, consider that it is a deal which brings unfair competition and social dumping, as it is not protecting the environment nor improving working conditions of the workers in the Mercosur countries, and it puts our agriculture and food sector here in Europe our high and further strain. We don't see effective protection for our sensitive sectors. We need to compete with a region which is not producing under the same standards, if it is from a food safety perspective, from a social and labor perspective, from an environmental perspective, and we fear that this will have as well consequences on the workers in Europe losing their jobs. And we see really relevant risks for our sectors with potential negative consequences on employment, on the workers and working conditions. And we don't see the Mercosur agreement neither raising labor and environmental standards actually in the Mercosur countries. And we see the risk that it would undermine local value chain stability. They cannot compete if you look at it from a purely economic perspective. Because, the products which will come in from the Mercosur countries will be cheaper. But they can compete from other perspectives. If we look at sustainability and health, for example. Because, in Europe, of course, we have much higher standards with regard to food safety, with regard to the environment. So if we think, for example, about pesticides, but as well with regard to social matters, so the working conditions, for example. So there is no level playing field between the EU and Mercosur, but we can, well, here we can compete on higher and with higher standards. Well, the EU should have ensured that this agreement brings a level playing field. So they should have ensured that actually the standards which we have in the EU have as well to be applied to the products coming into the EU. Because then, of course, if it's the farmers or if it's the food production, would have competed on the same level. So a level playing field, the reciprocity of standards, but it would have been extremely important to ensure with that agreement as well policy coherence. So if we look at sustainability, if we look at fair labor standards, there is no coherence. So what we do with that agreement is that we erode our own rights, our own standards. What would have really been needed would have been as well that there should have been, with the pressure coming from the EU to sign such an agreement, there would have been a possibility to improve as well the labor and environmental standards in the Mercosur countries. We always ask as effort that if we do an FTA, that there are actually, for example, the ILO standards need to be enforceable. So we look at the TSD chapters, it's the Trade and Sustainable Development chapters, they need to be enforceable. And again, here with Mercosur, we have an agreement where they are not, because there are no sanctions linked to the enforcement of the chapters. So all these are points which could have made this agreement much more interesting as well for the workers in our sectors. Of course, nowadays everybody speaks about red tape, about deregulation, and about administrative burden. I would say this is not the issue that should be discussed here. The issue we should discuss is the unequal treatment and the unfair wealth distribution we actually have in the agriculture and food sector. Why should we speak about that? Is because we are here speaking about sectors which are already for the workers very precarious. We have very poor working conditions in these sectors. We have low wages. So it is on top of it times in which restructurings in our sectors are growing. We are closing farms, we are closing food production sites, and people lose their jobs. So we should speak about the concerns and the fears of these workers, and not if a piece of law is red tape or not. So we really see an imbalance in the wealth distributions between the vulnerable people across the food chain. Those are predominantly small farmers, and even more, of course, the agricultural workers. But it is nevertheless a sector where we have as well big winners, which are the multinationals, the retailers and the shareholders of food giants. They make good money. But we have as well the losers, as I said before. And it puts really pressure on small farmers and the agricultural workers. And that is as well linked to very systemic issues we have in that sector, which needs to be solved, like the concentration of big agri-food monopolies across the food chain, and which then put the small farmers under pressure, and we face then their disappearance, and with that as well the loss of jobs for our workers.